Story 1. The Lost Girl on the Bridge. It was late November when Samantha, a college student driving back from a weekend trip, found herself on a winding country road in rural Pennsylvania. The rain had begun as a gentle drizzle, but soon turned into a torrential downpour. Her headlights barely cut through the sheets of rain, and her windshield wipers were working overtime, scraping rhythmically across the glass. She hadn't planned on taking this road, but after a wrong turn and some confusion with her GPS, she was now far off her intended route. The road, surrounded by dense forest, seemed abandoned, with not a single car passing her for miles. All she could hear was the relentless beat of the rain and the occasional crack of thunder. As she approached a narrow old stone bridge, something caught her eye in the beams of her headlights. A young girl, standing on the edge of the bridge, drenched and shivering. She wore a white dress now soaked through, and her long dark hair hung limply around her face. Samantha's heart skipped a beat. What was a little girl doing out here in the middle of nowhere, alone in this storm? Feeling a sense of obligation to help, Samantha slowed down and rolled down her window, rain spraying into her car. "Are you okay?" she shouted, trying to be heard over the rain. The girl didn't respond, but slowly turned to face her. Her face was unnaturally pale, her eyes dark and hollow. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine, a sense of wrongness that made her hesitate. But she couldn't just leave a child out here. "Do you need a ride?" Samantha called out again, her voice faltering slightly. The girl nodded and slowly walked toward the car. Samantha unlocked the passenger door, watching as the girl climbed into the seat without saying a word. The car was silent, save for the rain and the soft creak of the leather seat as the girl settled in. "Where are you headed?" Samantha asked, her voice tense. The girl pointed straight ahead, down the long, dark road. Samantha, feeling increasingly uneasy but unsure why, nodded and started driving again. After a few minutes of silence, she glanced over at the girl, but she was gone. The passenger seat was completely empty, yet the seatbelt was still buckled as if someone had been sitting there. Panic surged through her. She swerved slightly as her heart pounded in her chest. Had she imagined the whole thing? Was she just tired from the drive? Samantha looked into her rearview mirror, and that's when she saw her. The girl standing on the bridge they had just crossed, staring at her car as it disappeared into the storm. When Samantha finally reached the next town, she stopped at a diner, still shaking from the encounter. The waitress saw her pale face and asked if everything was okay. Samantha explained what had happened, expecting disbelief, but the waitress only shook her head solemnly. "You're not the first," she said softly. "That girl, she's been seen there for years. She died in an accident on that bridge with her parents. Now she's always looking for a ride, but she never gets far." Story 2. The Stranger in the Rearview Mirror. Lucas was a long-haul truck driver, used to navigating dark, empty highways in all kinds of weather. He prided himself on his endurance and his ability to drive through the night without getting spooked. But one stormy night in late March changed all of that. He was hauling a load through the mountains of West Virginia, driving along a narrow, winding road that hugged the cliffs. The rain was relentless, making the already treacherous road even more dangerous. He had barely seen another car for hours, and the only sound in his truck was the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of his radio. As he rounded a sharp bend, his headlights illuminated something up ahead, an old beat-up car parked on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking weakly. A man stood next to it, waving his arms frantically. Lucas slowed down, feeling a pang of sympathy. This was no place to be stranded, especially in this weather. He pulled over and rolled down his window. "Need some help?" he shouted over the rain. The man nodded, his face pale and gaunt, his clothes soaked through. "Car broke down," he said, his voice rough. "Could you give me a lift to the next gas station?" Lucas hesitated for a moment, but the man's desperate expression made up his mind. "Hop in," he said, unlocking the passenger door. The man climbed in, dripping water all over the seat, but Lucas didn't mind. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the rain pounding against the windshield. Lucas couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping over him. Something about the man didn't feel right. He was too quiet, his eyes fixed straight ahead, never blinking. Where exactly are you headed? Lucas asked, trying to make conversation. Just keep driving, the man muttered. Lucas glanced at him, but the man didn't move, didn't offer any further explanation. The hair on the back of Lucas's neck stood up. He flicked his eyes to the rearview mirror, just out of habit, and froze. In the reflection, the man wasn't sitting in the passenger seat anymore. He was in the back seat staring directly at Lucas through the mirror, his eyes wide and unblinking. Lucas slammed on the brakes, his heart racing. He turned around, but the back seat was empty. The man was gone. Panicked, Lucas sped off down the road, not stopping until he reached a well-lit truck stop miles away. He spent the rest of the night in his cab, unable to shake the image of that man's face in the mirror. The next morning, he asked around at the truck stop and learned about the man who had been hit by a car on that stretch of road years ago, while trying to hitch a ride in the rain. Story 3. The handprints on the glass. Cassie and her boyfriend Tom were returning from a camping trip one rainy October night. The rain had come out of nowhere, drenching the forest and turning the winding mountain road they were on into a slick, dangerous path. They were both tired and eager to get home, their conversation growing quiet as they focused on the road ahead. The rain beat heavily on the windshield, and the narrow road, flanked by towering trees, felt more claustrophobic with every mile. Suddenly, the car's headlights flickered, and the radio went dead. Tom cursed under his breath, tapping the dashboard. The headlights came back on, but something felt wrong. The air in the car had grown colder, and both Cassie and Tom felt a sense of dread creeping in. As they drove deeper into the forest, Cassie noticed something on her window. At first, she thought it was the rain playing tricks on her eyes, but then she saw it clearly. Handprints, small and faint, but unmistakable, forming on the outside of her window. "Tom, look at this," she whispered, pointing to the handprints. Tom glanced over and froze. There were more handprints, now appearing on the windshield, as though invisible hands were pressing against the glass, trying to get in. Tom pressed the accelerator, driving faster as the handprints spread across all the windows, smudging the glass in odd patterns. Cassie's heart raced as she watched, helpless. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the handprints faded away, leaving only streaks of rain behind. They didn't speak for the rest of the drive, both too shaken by what they had seen. When they finally reached home, they inspected the car, but there were no signs of the handprints anywhere. Months later, they heard a story from a local about a group of children who had died in a bus accident on that same mountain road years ago. Some say that on rainy nights, the children's spirits still wander, trying to find their way home, leaving handprints on the windows of passing cars. Conclusion. These 3 rainy night drives remind us that even the most mundane of activities, driving home on a stormy night, can take a terrifying turn. Whether it's a ghostly hitchhiker, an unsettling passenger, or eerie handprints that appear out of nowhere, the darkness of a rainy night can reveal things we're not meant to see. The next time you're caught in a storm, alone on the road, be careful. You never know who or what might be watching.